the timing of this could not have been better. The IoT, the IoT infancy. Oh, by the way, we did coin an acronym there, and that was I don't IoT, which of course is IDIoT, or
we used to call that the ID10T error. when you had a user who just wasn't there, and you needed to convince them that it wasn't their fault, you say, "Oh yeah, I've seen this all the time. It's an ID10T."
That's good. So, the original IoT infancy podcast was going to be about baby monitors, but I ended up breaking it up into 2 podcasts because there was just too much to talk about, and the details were just so juicy of the ridiculous lack of security that these technologies had. Things like the URL that you used to go to a website to view your baby cam on the net. The URL had a serial number, and you could just change some digits and view other people's babies. It was just horrifying lack of security. So then when this popped up on Reddit, I thought, oh, this is wonderful. So the title of this article on Reddit was, I bought and returned a set of Wi-Fi connected home security cameras, forgot to delete my account, and I can now watch the new owner. So this guy, it's just horrifying. This guy writes, a few months back, I purchased a Netgear Arlo home security camera set. I set up an online account, connected the cameras, tried them out for a few days, and ultimately changed my mind. They were returned to the store, and I never gave it another thought until today. I got a random email alerting me that the camera had detected motion, but I don't have any cameras. So I logged into my online account, and I can see the new owner, their house, and everything they're doing. Netgear obviously doesn't have a system in place to prevent cameras on multiple accounts. If I'm not mistaken, anyone could get the serial number off your cameras and link them to their online account to watch and record every move without your permission. A creepier dream. Does anyone else see this as a serious security flaw on Netgear's behalf? And then he says, I'm even happier that I returned them now. And then he, in a subsequent edit, he said, I left a message with Netgear this morning, which was yesterday, 6:20. He said, received a return call from a senior support engineer saying they're aware of this issue. Since the cameras aren't supposed to be resold, he says, I suppose they didn't think it would be an issue. What, are you supposed to destroy them and get credit? Anyway, he says, I was assured they were working on a fix within the next 3 weeks to prevent cameras on multiple accounts and force a hard reset on the cameras if cameras were previously registered in the system. And I should note that I tweeted this earlier, and several followers said, you know, I have those cameras, and the same thing happened. You just plug them in, and they don't ask you any questions. Everything just works. And,
here's the sad thing, Steve. This is not just a Netgear problem. I have seen this on so many cameras where the only thing that protects you is either a registration number that they've created and put into the firmware, or more likely, it's the MAC address. You have to know the MAC address. And I've seen way too many supposedly secure products that use a MAC address as a layer of security, which was never designed to be.
Nope, you're right.
And in fact, Gemmerby, if you go back to the screen real quick, this was posted on that Reddit page. So if people want to go and find out what this owner is doing right now, they could just use that. The information that's on this label right now, you could use to get into that camera. In fact, you could go down to your local Best Buy and take pictures of all of these tags and then just wait for them to get bought. And unfortunately, I've seen this, and I won't name any of the other manufacturers, But a lot of the other companies that compete in the same space as Netgear are doing this same low-cost authentication, which is, it's sad.
Yeah. So, this returns to the theme, IoT infancy. The only way to regard this is, first of all, we're in an incredibly early stage where companies are rushing to get their products on the market, and I'm sure that the front of the box says, secure encrypted webcam system. I'm sure that's a bullet point. And here's the consequence. I mean, here's the reality of it is that the architecture is, offers none of the secure encryption. Maybe the connection is, but obviously anybody's able to get on the website and see what's going on in the new owner's home. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
You know what? I think when I think about this, I think of the GM hack that they did. Was it Black Hat DEF CON last year? I think it was last year, where they found out that the only security was the IP address range. So they just thought no one's going to guess the IP address. Well, once you had one device, you knew all the other devices are probably going to be near that. So you just kept scanning it until something responded. And it's this sort of lazy security that lets people think that, well, I paid a lot of money for this device, therefore it must be secure, which is completely not the case.
Well, in fact, that's exactly the way Shields Up first got created. Because I had the first, back in the early days, the first, it was a DSL or IDSL connection for GRC. And we got, I don't remember if we had multiple IPs or just one, and maybe an early NAT router, but I had a public internet protocol address, an IP address, and I thought, I wonder what's in the neighborhood, and so I scanned like plus or minus 100 IPs and found all these C: drives, all these other Windows machines with their C drives exposed, and it was like, oh my Lord. Someone's got to, raise the flag about this. So, of course, I created Shields Up. And boy, in the early days of Shields Up, people went there and I showed them their C drive. You could browse your own C directory on my webpage. It was just horrifying back then. But so there was an example of another aspect of infancy. That was the infancy of Windows machines' first contact to the internet, and that was the reality. Now, as a consequence, all ISPs now block ports 137 through 139 and 440. Is it 445 or 443? I always get those confused.
443.
Because one is secure email.
Right. 443.
I think it's 445,
Was it
and 443 is email.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Anyway, so all ISPs block that, in order to protect their own clients who may still somehow have a drive on the net, not behind NAT, not behind a software firewall, just exposed and flapping in the breeze. But anyway, so the good news is there's hope. We're at this stage now with webcams and home security systems and so forth. We were once at that stage with people's hard drives on their computers. And we're finally, it took a long time, but now we're secure. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be similar escapades for a long time on IoT until we finally get some standards. I think what we're going to need is some sort of standards body to come in and establish the way this stuff has to work and come up with a protocol, because right now it's the Wild West. Every manufacturer just does whatever they want to, as little as they want to, and then stamps "it's secure" on the box. And, people at Kmart say, oh, let's get some cameras, and stick it in their cart, and off they go. And now everybody else can see what they're doing.
Right. I remember a few years ago, it was Access Communications, which sold high-end cameras. I mean, they're way more expensive than the ones you would buy at Consumer Best Buy. But unfortunately, the login page was searchable, so Google could index it. and you could look for a particular page that would bypass security. So you would just do a Google search for this one page name, and it would list all the cameras, the access cameras that could be bypassed just by clicking on the link. It was a little bit scary. But Steve, it's funny because all of these zero configuration devices, and again, Netgear, D-Link, think of all the lower cost hardware. Most of them are built off of a singular reference design. I mean, if you crack them open, they vary very little on the inside. And the reference design was created along with its firmware for you to improve upon. And some of these businesses have not improved upon it. All they've done is they've added their branding. And then they add a password screen, which is really just a couple of lines of code that compare one string against another string. And that's it. But, and I'd love to get your input on this. We've had talks at the last 3 CESs, the last 2 Black Hats, the last 2 DEF CONs from high-level officials in the U.S. government who are saying, look, we understand that you're in a rush to get your creations out into the market, but security can no longer be an afterthought, because that's what it is right now. It's get it working, and then I'll think about security later. Well, unfortunately, it stops at the get it working part, and security is tacked on as an afterthought. How do we change that? Because it's so difficult for some people to think security first.
Say, for example, and while you were talking, I was trying to come up with a way, something that would be foolproof, that would allow a device to know if it should randomize something in itself. And so, for example, imagine that because we know there's a lot of technology in these things. Often there's a little Linux microkernel. They've got firmware. They've got non-volatile storage. Imagine if when power comes up on this thing, it reaches out to well-known NTP servers and checks the date. And that allows it to know autonomously how long it's been powered off. And if it's been powered off more than some period of time, like 24 hours, it has to be repaired in some fashion. It just decides, okay, I'm no longer going to trust my own current configuration. The user's going to have to do something in order to reassociate the camera with their account. Something like that. So that it can still be simple, yet it can protect users from themselves, because that's what they need.
Right. I want to bring up something from the chat room real quick, because PS Chops brings up a good point. Something that a lot of us think, which is, and I quote, if only companies were liable for lapses in security, things would get straight pretty quickly. And I understand that. I understand that sentiment. I feel that way sometimes. However, there is the flip side to it, which is you want to reward companies for being honest. And if a company thinks it's going to get dinged for a security lapse, they are much more likely to sit on a potential security hole rather than announce it immediately.
Good point. Yes.
So, many of the best policy examples I've seen have been, if you announce a security hole within the first 10 days of you learning about it, then you get sort of a blanket immunity because you were trying to do the right thing.
Or how about if we add to that concept, if they open source the software,
right,
then they're also let off the hook.
Precisely. Yeah. If you allow it to be vetted,
all the ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, I think, because we can talk about security vulnerabilities all day, and they're fun because they get very creative when we look at ways of getting around authentication. But
it's a target-rich environment.
It is a very target-rich environment. But ultimately, as security professionals, we want our fellow professionals to have a reason to do the right thing.